and welcome to another edition of Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham, where Team Needham discusses everything healthcare. I'm your host, Shawn Needham, and I'm streaming live from my home podcast studio, and I am super excited to have Dr. Michelle Gordon on our podcast today. She is actually a native Washingtonian, grew up not far from me, south of me, in Richland, Washington, and I'm in Moses Lake, Washington, and it's super cool to connect with people. She is a physician, general surgeon, and she decided to make a career transition a couple of years ago into lifestyle medicine, and we will discuss that and her transition and our personal transitions, because both of us have a story behind it where we weren't the healthiest ourselves. So Dr. Michelle Gordon, welcome to our show.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
So tell us a little bit about your backstory, and even go far enough back where you grew up, and then what brought you into med school.
Yeah, so I grew up in Washington State in this small town of Richland that actually.
Now wait a minute, I got to stop you.
Yeah.
Okay, you're calling Richland a small town. Remember, I live in Moses Lake.
It was a small town then. It's not, and the Tri-Cities have really grown, but
yeah,
it was a small town. It was actually even smaller before the Manhattan Project took over in the 40s, and there were only about 800 people. It was a farming community, and what happened was, I think Washington D.C. found an area as far away from it in the contiguous United States that it could to practice this Manhattan Project stuff near a body of water. And that's what the Hanford Project became. Right. And we actually at the Hanford Project built the plutonium for Nagasaki. And a lot of people don't know that, but it's the claim to fame of the Tri-Cities. So it's become a think tank, and there's a lot of bright people that go there. And when I was there, my father died there in 2017. And so I went back several times, and I met a lot of people cycling because I like to cycle, and through the cycling shop there called Greenies. Shout out to Greenies.
Yeah. Right off G-Way or close to G-Way. Is it on G-Way?
It's on G-Way. I think.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's close. It's really close. It's either that or
it's on the corner or something. Anyway.
Yeah.
So, but I met other people, that were really active, but they were all like PhDs and, particle physicists or, whatever. So, so that's the background, but it was a small town then. It's about 4 hours from Seattle by car. And I always felt like I was really constrained, and I didn't realize it was before it became a really great wine country.
Yeah.
And I grew up, I graduated high school in 1983. So we just had our 40th reunion, and I'm gay. And so if you've ever been to Southeastern Washington State, it's very much like Southern Idaho, where there's a church on every corner, and living in a certain way is not okay.
Right.
And so I struggled throughout the 80s with my own identity and trying to understand who I was. And ended up getting married in 1988 to a guy, had a baby, all that, and then realized that that's not me, and we separated. But as far as becoming a doctor, so one thing about living in the Tri-Cities is that there is intelligence all around you.
Yeah,
it is just one of these places that has a lot of smart people, and you're expected to perform and go to college and do stuff. But for me, there was a time when I was 5 years old that I didn't realize until maybe January of 2019. I had this memory where I'm 5 years old, I'm standing behind my mom, so I like my eyes are right at her, behind her knees. And she says, "Those guys are so rich, they're doctors." And she was talking about her two brothers who were family practice doctors in California. And I heard this, and my little brain went to work, and it said, "Oh, Mom wants to be rich. And the doctors are rich. So that's the only way I can make money. I got to make my mom happy." And that's actually what happened. And I entered medical school at age 31.
Wow. That's quite the story. And back to Richland and smart people. There used to be, it was a few years ago, but it used to have the highest concentration of PhDs in any city.
Yeah, I don't know anymore. I do know that, I eventually, I moved to California. I got married. I started college in 1988, right after we got married. And I went to Long Beach City College because I was a bit of a rebellious teen. And so I had to make up for my high school education because I didn't really perform. I was busy, smoking pot and kind of being a bit of a rebel. And so I went to community college, and then I applied to 2 colleges out of community college. I applied to UC Irvine and Harvey Mudd College. And I got into both. And UC Irvine would have been 2 more years. Harvey Mudd would have been 3 to 4 more years. And I thought, I'm going to go with the harder choice. And if you know anything about Harvey Mudd College, Harvey Mudd is a college that competes with MIT and Caltech for students and has the highest rate of PhDs per capita of any college in the country and professional degrees. So almost anybody who graduates from Harvey Mudd gets into medical school, law school, PhD, whatever. So that's what I did. And I'm the only woman, as far as I know, to ever have a baby while matriculating at that school.
Wow. Congratulations. That's an accomplishment.
Yeah.
And then where'd you go to med school?
I went to med school at College of Osteopathic Medicine of the Pacific in Pomona, California. I applied all over the country. I got interviewed there. And interestingly, my interview was scheduled for April 15th of 1995. And on April 7th, my brother died in Atlanta. And people at work were like, can't you change your interview? And I'm like, no.
Not really, no.
No. And so I went and I talked about my brother and got a little teary, and I had to control my emotions, and they waitlisted me. And so I wasn't their first choice, but if you remember the 90s, how
I'm pretty much your age. So yes,
so remember in the 90s with the answering machines, you had to call in with and push a button. So I was working, I had a job, and I was working in IT doing something. Now, let me just back up a minute. My son, so I graduated Harvey Mudd College, and I started a job in downtown Los Angeles working at a law firm in IT, waiting to kind of doing something before I started medical school. I wanted to work a bit and figure out how to deal with my life because I didn't have a good marriage and my son. And what happened was my son got sick. He got really sick, and he almost died of leukemia, and he was 21 months old. And so I had to quit the job. And after he stabilized a bit after treatment, then I took a job actually back at Harvey Mudd doing IT. And they were really supportive of me. And what happened was I was sitting in my office, and I had gone to this college, this interview with medical school. And I'm calling them up. Every week I call them up. Do you have a seat? Because they waitlisted me. So I knew if they got a seat, I would get in. And I'd call and talk to them and say, look, I'm right here. I'll drop everything. If there's a seat, I'll drop everything. Now, at this point, my husband and I had broken up, and, I was living kind of hand to mouth because he wasn't really supporting us anymore. And then, of course, my son, who was still getting treated for cancer, I was driving back and forth, and sometimes I'd have to call into work. I mean, they were really supportive. So I call my answering machine, listen, and it's the lady from the admissions office saying, we have a seat for you. Come with $1,800 or something. I don't know. It was $1,800, $1,200. I don't know how much it was. It was a lot.
Which is a lot of money back then.
And I looked at my bank account. My bank account had $500 in it. And I called my dad, who is, a particle physicist, but, he's not rich. He's, he's a working guy, right? But, a physicist and a researcher. And I call him up and I said, listen, Dad, I just got into medical school. I need $1,200. Can you send it to me? So the only time I've ever used Western Union, and I go to Western Union, I pick up the money and I go there and I give them, and it was 5 days. 5 days. So I missed all the pomp and circumstance. I missed the white coat ceremony. I didn't even know that was an option. And here I am.
Awesome. And then you decided to be a general surgeon, correct?
I did. Yeah. It's really interesting. I always thought, because of my son's treatment, I thought I would do pediatric oncology. I really did. But when I looked back at my career in all of my rotations. And this was when I was a fourth year medical student. I was starting to think about applying to residencies. And I said, well, I'm going to do a rotating internship because that was the thing back then. And then I can decide after that.
Mhm.
But then when I did like kind of an assessment of everything I'd done, and I was always in the OR. I was always going to the OR. It didn't matter what rotation. If I was on family practice, I went to the OR with their patients. If I was on internal medicine, I went to the OR with their patients. And when I went to City of Hope, and it was a surgical rotation. And so I was like, oh, okay, I need to do surgery. And so I went to Chicago for an internship and then came to New York for surgery and then stayed.
And that's what, excuse me. Are you in New York now? Yes.
I'm in New York in Westchester County. Yeah.
Okay. And when was it you started getting disenfranchised about the system?
It was almost immediate, actually. And the problem is for me is I'm fundamentally unemployable. So I'm oppositionally defiant. I am a bit ADD. I'm a bit Aspergery. I'm a bit autistic, and I need to have things my way. And so I don't really fit into the box. And for me to have to work inside the system of the hospital was really hard. And the politics, I couldn't navigate them. I'm just not good with that. I'm very direct and blunt, as you can tell. Probably just, people either like me or they don't. And I've accepted that.
Which makes you a good surgeon, by the way.
Well,
really?
Yeah, but I'm not very touchy-feely. And so, some surgeons are and some surgeons aren't, and I'm just not. And so what happened was I grew my practice. I hired a consultant to help me, and I grew my practice I had 4 employed surgeons working for me out of 2 different hospitals. And my goal was to actually kind of extricate myself from the day-to-day so I wouldn't have to operate and put myself more in a leadership role and then, replace myself. Right. And what I found was that surgeons are assholes and they're hard to lead. Now, not all surgeons are like that, but surgeons are hard to lead. They want to be the boss. And I didn't enjoy it at all. And I got really depressed and had some fleeting suicidal thoughts. And I looked at my life and I said, this is not how I want to live. And then when COVID happened, I was like, oh, this is a great opportunity to close everything down. And so in July of 2020, I put up my scalpel, and that was it. And I actually thought I was leaving medicine forever.
Wow.
And it took me 18 months to realize that it was burnout that was causing my issues. I had, I had been taking so much call for so many years and not getting enough sleep. And I had my weight ballooned. I wasn't taking care of myself. And I had this recurring thought, I just want to sleep through the night. I just want to sleep through the night. That's all I want. And that was a big deal to me. I want to be able to exercise. I don't want to be on call anymore. I don't want to be disturbed. So I thought I didn't see a path forward in medicine. So I started a business about menopause, and you can still buy the menopause stuff, and we're actually continuing to sell it. But it's not my main focus anymore. And as I started looking, I'm like, I'm a doctor. I have skills. I can learn new skills. I can still help people as a doctor, and people will pay me. And so that's kind of how I transitioned into lifestyle medicine this year.
And I will say it's kind of a common story for a lot of us in healthcare. I mean, I'm guilty of it too. Mine was a little bit earlier in my career than yours, but when my kids got to be teenagers or young teenagers, I'm like, I want to be able to be healthy with my kids. I want to be able to ride bikes with them. I want to be able to, play baseball with them instead of just, sitting on the couch and being tired all the time. And really, when you look at, you and I were chatting before the podcast, when you look at, go to a typical hospital, and go into the lunchroom at lunch and just look at the healthcare workers and how unhealthy most of them are. Shift work, not sleeping, and then not eating well and eating at poor times and not eating good food. And, the health of, we're supposed to keep patients healthy, yet most of us aren't healthy. So that's when I had an aha moment. And I'm so glad I did. And I'm glad you did, because you're right. We have skills and people need us. And,
Yeah.
And we need to, we can educate them to be healthy themselves. And I think we have to start with ourselves. We have to be good examples. And most healthcare professionals are not.
Right. Well, I think that's really a big problem, is that we're not taught self-care in medical school. And as a matter of fact, in residency, we're taught, to put ourselves last. And this expectation that doctors, especially of all healthcare, will donate their time, are expected to work without compensation. Throughout the whole pandemic, doctors were expected to work more without more compensation, but no other member of the healthcare team was expected to work multiple extra shifts without compensation. And that is, I think, the biggest issue, is that we spend the most time learning how to do our craft, and then we take the most responsibility, and then we have the most liability, because nurse practitioners and PAs are hard to sue, and doctors are easier to sue. So it's a real conundrum, I think, in the medical field. And I think it's done on purpose. I think we're taught certain things. We're taught how to manage disease, not to prevent disease.
Yeah, I for sure. I just posted a video a few days ago on 3 classes of drugs I would not take. And one of the class of drugs is statins. And, I don't believe Lipitor or Mevacor or what have you, or cholesterol in general is really the problem that's causing heart disease.
It's sugar.
Yeah. I mean,
it's sugar. Sugar makes everything sticky.
If statins work so well to prevent heart disease, Dr. Gordon, then how come everybody's on them? Not everybody, that's a strong term, but they've been around for over 30 years. And yet heart disease is an all-time high. It's not cholesterol.
Well, that's probably true. But, you also have to, the randomized controlled trials do show that they prolong life. And so it's hard. You have to balance it. I've never taken a statin. I like to run.
Well, right. And, running increases your HDL, decrease your triglycerides, which are probably the 2 of the most important lipids. But I think it's about insulin. Insulin resistance and high insulin levels is what causes a lot of the problems. Well,
it's not just that, but it's, the high insulin levels, and then obesity, and then leptin resistance on top of that. Right. So if the average American eats about 80 pounds of sugar a year.
Think of 80, think about that. Yeah. 80 pounds. That's half a person's body weight in sugar.
And on top of that, if all of the studies that showed that sugar was poison to us have been suppressed, just like what happened with tobacco. Because remember, America, we like to pretend that we're the land of the free and the home of the brave, but what we really are is the land of the corporation and the home of the profit.
One thing good about COVID, Dr. Gordon, is I think that got exposed during COVID, and people are waking up and just realize how much the corporations, have done. RFK Jr., I don't know if you follow him, but he used a term I'd never heard of, agency capture. And the corporations have basically, big corporations have basically taken over the federal government.
Agencies. That's not new. That's been going on since the 30s. And so it's since the crash of Wall Street, that probably, was that 29?
Yeah. And then if you get into the history of it, that happened after the Federal Reserve was created in 1913, and that's when it all went downhill. Whole other story, topic for another podcast.
That's completely different. Nixon and the gold standard and all those things.
Right, but by the same token, when money is involved, which it usually is with everything, follow the money. And when you look at the food industry or the drug industry, medicine in general is controlled by insurance companies, and drug companies and insurance companies are in collusion together. I mean, seriously, you just look at what EMRs do. And I don't know from a general surgeon standpoint, how much, drug therapy you're told how to prescribe. I don't know, but from an, internal medicine or family practice doctor, they are told their EMR is tracked by insurance companies, and drug companies tell insurance companies what's on formulary. And if somebody's had a heart attack, they need to be prescribed this.
Yep.
And if they, XYZ. Well,
and there's Medicare rules. I mean, if you participate with Medicare and you don't want to lose 2% of your income, then you have to do certain things. And so what's happened, I think, with doctors who used to be very, very respected as pillars of the community and smart, is that what's happened is the commoditization of healthcare in America, especially by these big insurance conglomerates, and then the pharmaceutical complex, the big pharmaceutical industrial complex. What's happened is that they've found the scapegoat to be doctors, and doctors have taken it because there are laws against doctors organizing. There's laws against doctors having normal business relationships that everybody else has. And so
it would be illegal in any other industry.
Yeah. And so it's completely legal for a lawyer to refer a client to someone and pay them and get paid. It's completely illegal for a doctor who accepts Medicare to do that.
Yeah. Star
And so what's happened is doctors have become the factory workers of the medical industrial complex. And they're high paid. But remember, kids are coming out of medical school now with over $500,000 of debt. And so we're saddling these kids with a house payment without them being able to make enough money to buy a house.
Which I think is by design, by the way, Dr. Gordon.
Of course it is. Yeah, it's all, open a medical school, you'll make a lot of money. I mean, medical schools they're printing money.
It's about money. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So there are people like me. There's a lot of us out there who just completely don't even stay inside the system. And so I do not take insurance. Will never work for an insurance company again. When I did general surgery, I didn't take insurance, but we still billed insurance. Now I won't even bill insurance. Now, if you want to come to me for lifestyle modifications or obesity or menopause, whatever, you pay me directly. I'll give you a super bill. You can work for the insurance company and get your money back. Rates are fair, but I just, a lot of people have a very high deductible. So why not spend your deductible with someone who's going to spend time with you and really help you solve your problems and maybe help you change your lifestyle in a way that is actually going to produce positive changes in your life instead of taking another drug.
Right. Now, speaking of drug therapy, how about let's put you in the hot seat being a surgeon. And I interviewed Dr. Shawn Baker. I don't know if you've heard of him. He's a orthopedic surgeon turned kind of lifestyle medicine guy. And he started changing people's lives when he started changing their diets, and then they didn't need surgery anymore.
True.
Yeah. So, and I was astounded when he told me the numbers. I asked him live on our podcast. So, Dr. Baker, if people, as a pharmacist, I'm like, I know that 80% of the drugs are not needed if you change your lifestyle. But I thought, this is surgery, this is orthopedic surgery. I mean, at least, over 70% of the surgeries that are done have to be done. His claim was that over 80% of orthopedic surgeries are unnecessary if people change their lifestyle. I was blown away. So what about in general surgery? I mean, are there certain diseases that certain procedures that people don't need if they change their lifestyle?
I think so. I mean, one of the most common general surgical procedures is the cholecystectomy.
Right.
And that comes primarily from lecithin or cholesterol gallstones. They get precipitated out of the bile into the gallbladder. And these stones can then cause pancreatitis. They can cause all sorts of pain after eating. And I think that the high sugar, high fat diet of America, the SAD, standard American diet,
Yeah.
really contributes to this. Now, is it possible to reverse this with a better diet? I don't have the data on that, and I don't know if that's ever been studied. But what I can say is that if you want to avoid gallbladder surgery, then the thing to do is to eat a plant-forward diet with lean meats and whole foods.
Right.
But I mean, some people are predisposed. Now, as far as like appendicitis go, that's like, 10 to 15% of the population gets appendicitis. That it happens in families. I've done 3 generations in the past.
Interesting.
So, oftentimes the pathophysiology of appendicitis is, a little fecal ball that gets stuck. And then the opening of the appendix gets blocked, and then there's nothing you can do.
And infected maybe too?
Well, it gets blocked because what the actual function of the appendix is to reset the gut microbiome. And if you don't have an appendix, it's harder to reset your gut microbiome. So if the appendix gets blocked, the bacteria in there will overgrow and cause inflammation. So, but the body does its best to ward it off and try and help it heal. But if the fluids can't go back and forth, then
right.
Yeah. And that's why the appendix will burst sometimes. So I don't think that's another very common general surgical procedure. Now, for the last 10 years of my practice, all I did was emergencies. So as someone who works with people out of the emergency room primarily, I mean, I saw a lot of perforated colons, a lot of perforated stomach ulcers. If you don't smoke, I mean, stopping smoking is probably the best thing you can do for your health, bar none, if you're a smoker, because that will decrease all the inflammation. And then, if you don't exercise at all, there are things you can do to get yourself to move again. I mean, sometimes if you're maybe a couple hundred pounds overweight and it really is hard to move, then just start by swaying your body back and forth, and do that for a few minutes, get your heart rate up, and then you can start to move more. You don't have to do it all or none. And that was a big lesson for me, because in menopause, I gained probably 60, 70 pounds. And I was really frustrated because it just kept coming. And I did not know what to do. And I wasn't really exercising. So I hired a coach to kind of get myself going. And after a couple of years of just being on the bicycle, I said, oh, let me try running. And then I said, let me try swimming. And I started doing these things. But for women who are menopausal, probably the best way to reshape your body is resistance training. And that's not always fun.
Boom. But it is so important. My wife and I had a podcast dedicated to that just this last week.
Yeah. If you really want to reshape your body, it's resistance training and high protein.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting because there's a lot of data out there. And if you read the data from muscle, like bodybuilders, that's without the hormones, forget about like dealing with hormones, but bodybuilders, it's their primary fuel is protein, and they almost never eat excessive carbs.
Yeah, no. I mean, think about what is muscle. I mean, muscle is protein. I mean, that makes a lot of sense.
It's not just that, but it's the thermic effect of food.
Right.
So, we expend energy just by sitting, and the more you weigh, the more your energy that you expend will be. That's just because of the mass effect. Right. That's called resting metabolic rate.
Yeah.
But then you have intentional exercise, which will be maybe 30% of your calories burned if you're doing enough of it. And then thermic effect of food is 10% of your total calories. And that can go up if you're mostly protein.
Yeah.
So it's ways to burn more calories.
And when it has to do with weight, I mean, I always say that, you can't exercise your way out of a poor diet. I mean, so you just can't. You got it. Eating is so important. You can't exercise over a bad diet. I've tried.
Well, exercise can help you feel better. It can help your depression. These are all benefits of exercise, but exercise does not help you lose weight. Exercise helps you take care of your body and helps your mental health. And it can help shape your body, especially resistance training. But if you want to lose weight, you've got to start in the kitchen.
Yeah. And then another thing I like to always say too is, you already alluded to it when you were in med school about how, you weren't sleeping, and is sleep. Another thing that we can do for our body is sleep, and sleep trumps exercise and diet, because we will die. And this is what I tell patients: we will die without sleep before we'll die without food. That's just a fact.
Yeah. You start getting hallucinations and
psychosis and stuff.
Yeah, sleep deprivation. I mean, listen, I'm in the self-help space, right? Like I'm in the personal development space, and somebody that I will never, ever, ever pay money to is Tony Robbins. And the reason is because sleep deprivation is a big part of his breakdown. Yeah. So when you do one of the Tony Robbins seminars, he keeps you up late, like 2 a.m. And then they start at maybe, 9 or 10 the next morning. And that will decrease your increase your vulnerability, decrease your defenses,
your immune system.
But even your psychological, because he's an NLP practitioner. So to try and help you like break through to the next level. But I won't do it because I spent all those years on call, and also one thing I should tell you is I smoked all the way through med school and residency.
Wow.
And so, when I was a chief resident, so it was my last year of residency, is my 5th year. I woke up one day and said, I'm done smoking. And I got somebody to give me a prescription for Wellbutrin.
Yeah.
And I didn't even know it, but I was taking double the dose. I took 300 milligrams twice a day. Don't do that.
You can tolerate
Wellbutrin, one of the biggest problems. I took 300 milligrams twice a day.
You could tolerate it? You weren't getting nauseated?
I was great. I felt so happy. But it took, in 3 days, I stopped smoking, and I've never smoked since.
Was that late? That was early 2000s, probably?
That was late? 2004.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so it's been about 20 years since I quit smoking. But and I haven't had any cravings or anything. It was just like I was done. I was outside smoking, with the other guys when they were smoking, and I just was like, no, I'm done. And I probably took it for like 2 weeks and realized I had doubled up the dose. But don't do that, because, and I didn't know, I didn't know, but I just was so motivated to quit. So yeah.
So now, with this history and these stories that you've had, how has that helped you talk to patients about lifestyle modifications?
Yeah, I think what has helped is to find the motivation. If you don't have a why, you're not going to follow. You can't rely on discipline forever, right? I mean, discipline is destiny, and I do believe that you start with discipline, and then it becomes habit, but you have to change your habits. But if you try to do it all at once, you're gonna have some failure, and then you're gonna give up, right? And so what I like to do is find out what the motivation is for someone. Like, why did I want to quit smoking? Well, because I felt like shit.
Yeah.
Okay. I really felt bad, and I wanted to feel better. And so that was the first thing. And then, why did I decide to change my diet? Because I felt like shit, and I wanted to feel better. But not everybody feels like shit, and they don't see it. Sometimes you don't start to see that you feel better until you make those changes, and those changes are subtle. They take time.
Yeah, absolutely. I know one of, my why was, which I already talked about, was I wanted to be healthy for my kids, so I could play with my kids. But some of the side effects of that was I did feel better. I did look better. So I felt better about myself. And then, I also say too that, health is contagious. And, I changed our family because of it. I was not a good role model, and I had a son that was overweight, and my wife was overweight. And, now, I mean, both my sons they're rock stars. They go to the gym, I don't know how many times a week. They eat great, and I think it rubs off on other people around us, not just our family, but our friends, our coworkers.
Sure.
Yeah. So tell us about a recent story where you've helped a patient on their lifestyle change.
So I have to go back to the menopause stuff because I am not seeing patients yet.
Yeah. Okay.
I am just really getting into this lifestyle medicine. And FYI, I'm in the process of getting licensed in multiple states. So if you want to work with me, if you live in Colorado or like right now, let me tell you exactly where I'm licensed right now.
You got to look it up.
I have to look at, I don't remember.
Yeah, right.
I don't know. Here it is. Okay. I'm Florida, Colorado, Utah, Virginia, New York, Texas, and Connecticut.
And not New Jersey. That's surprising.
Not yet. It's coming.
Not yet. Yeah.
It's coming. I just haven't gotten it yet. Yeah. Let me just double check that again. Colorado, Connecticut, Florida, Utah, Virginia, New York, Texas. And then in the works, I have California, Washington, Wyoming, Montana, all the West. Yeah. Utah. I got Utah already. Nevada, New Mexico, except for Oregon, because I never want to live in Oregon.
That's funny. You were really close to Oregon when you lived in Richland.
What's that?
Well, you were really close to Oregon when you were in Richland.
Yeah. Hermiston's right there.
30 miles, 20 miles away.
Yeah. Idaho and the most of the Eastern Seaboard plus Tennessee. So those are in the works. And I'll be seeing patients. But how I've helped people is it starts with the why. It starts with what do you want your ideal life to look like? It really starts with that. And I have a full exercise I take people through that breaks down the ideal day. And it is granular. It is, what do you eat? How do you wake up? Who do you wake up with? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then we start to work backwards from that. Like, what do you have to do? And what does that look like? What is your body like? What is your relationship like? What is your sex life like? What is, all these things. And we start to work toward it little by little by little. And what I like to say is that 1% changes add up into massive, massive improvements. So if I run, say, 20 minutes without stopping today and run 20 minutes and 20 seconds without stopping, tomorrow, right? Yeah. Then eventually I'm going to be able to run a marathon if that's my goal. Yeah. But it takes time and it's dose dependent and it requires consistency and going through when the motivation is down and finding discipline. So there's a lot there. So the support is really what makes the big difference. I have a client named Joan who was living in Florida and was very unhappy there because the political climate was not kind of what she believed. And Florida became very, very, very red pretty quickly around Trump. And it was really upsetting her. And she was very unhappy. And she said, I want to paint the Rocky shoreline. And over a series of 2 years, she decided, okay, I'm going to sell my house because the market is up and it's on the water. And she moved out and she had it renovated and she got it sold and she moved to Maine to paint the Rocky shoreline. And those were just little, and it was small steps. But if you think about it, if you've lived in a place for 40 years, think about all the accumulated crap you have to get rid of. Like I've lived in my house since 2008 and I feel like I'm buried.
Yeah.
Right. So that's one example of lifestyle changes. I have another client named Diane who we were talking and she said, I've always wanted to get a PhD. And I said, well, why haven't you?
Do it.
You? And so she'll get her PhD this year.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So it really comes back to what it is you want in your life.
Yeah. Well, I thank you so much for not totally quitting medicine because we need doctors like yourself. And you're very well qualified. And I'm upset when doctors leave the system and because they need to find what's, maybe a different place for them because, you're the doctors are the most educated person in the United States. I mean, think about it.
We are really, really highly, we know how to study.
Yeah. So don't let the system, don't just throw the baby out with the bathwater. Just find a different parallel system, which is what you've done. And I'm so glad. And as we wind this podcast up, I want to ask you what your passion is.
My passion. I would say, I'm multi-passionate. And since I have a bit of neurodivergence, I do go into hyperfixations. So I'm very passionate about cooking, and I love to cook really good food. And I learned how to cook. I had a chef for several years when I was working as a surgeon. I had a chef working in my house for like 7 years, and I learned how to cook from her. I knew how to cook before, but now like I know that I can cook food that I will want to eat and I'll like it. For the most, I mean, every once in a while I'll do something that's really not that good, but
really,
yeah, every once in a while. But like, and there's nothing I can't do. Like I can bake, and I can cook a full, like I could cook a full like English, like what do they call Sunday dinner kind of thing, like a Thanksgiving dinner. I can do all that. I can make candy. I can make caramel. I mean, so there's nothing I won't try, but I really enjoy baking. But I'm not baking right now because I'm trying to cut weight.
Yeah, it's tough when you're baking. Not
yeah.
It.
So I'm very, very passionate about creativity in the kitchen, because one thing I've found is that I can eat 99% fat-free turkey and enjoy it if I know how to put the spices together. And sure. that was, and I mean, fat-free meat is hard to eat because it's so dry.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, a big passion for me, getting back into weightlifting. And so I'm a bit passionate about that. And I'm very, very passionate about behavior change and habit building and how to be excellent. Those are big, big things for me.
That's awesome. Well, you've helped us realize our goal of this podcast, which is to educate and empower individuals to take charge of their own health. And that's really, they see you, or they see me, maybe 1 hour a month if they're lucky.
Yeah.
So ultimately they have to take charge of their own health, right?
That's true. Yeah, they do.
And we can help teach them.
So you can get a hold of me like at drmichellgordon.com.
Yeah, I want to stream your website. I know it's in designs phase still. But,
it's still in those. Yeah, we're actually getting ready to revamp the whole thing. But if you want to call me, I have a phone number.
Awesome. Well, say it. Let's say it.
914-420-8420. Can you put that on the screen?
I can. Give me just a second.
I'll put it.
And then let's see. I was going to ask you. Oh yeah, tell me about your biking, because my wife and I are avid bikers.
So yeah, I love cycling, but I'm not cycling on the road much anymore. I mostly cycle indoors. It depends on where I am in the country. What I've found is that here in Westchester County, the cars do not give us a lot of room, and I've fallen off the bike a few times avoiding cars, so I don't want to die, and so I ride indoors. But a few years ago, I took a big group of women to Mallorca, and we rode our bikes around and filmed it, and that's probably the first 8 episodes of the Menopause Movement podcast are this TV show that I did. So if you go into YouTube for Menopause Movement, or maybe even Dr. Michelle Gordon on YouTube, you can watch that TV show. It's there on YouTube.
I want to watch that.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah. It's the Dr. Michelle Gordon show. But if you have to go to the podcast, so like Launch Your Life podcast on Dr. Michelle Gordon, I think Menopause Movement still has a YouTube. So yeah.
Are your phone number right there?
That's correct. Yeah.
Awesome. So, well, thank you, Michelle, for being on the podcast today. I really want to keep in touch with you. Yeah. If you are ever back in Washington, my wife and I would love to go for a bike ride with you.
I definitely would want to do that. I used to ride all over. Whenever I went there for my dad, to see my dad, I would ride my bike. They make it. The one thing I like about Richland, I have to say, is they make it really, really easy to be active. There's lots of trails.
Absolutely. There's that one trail that follows the river. I don't know if it's called the River Trail or whatever.
Yeah.
Richland. That's
it goes past Leslie Groves Park, and then if you keep going on it, you end up at like one of the nuclear submarines.
You go all the way to exactly. I've been out there multiple times when I travel.
And then you drive to the end. It's where all the little stickers are that'll flatten your tire. And you drive to the end. It's like a nuclear sign. You're like, I'm going to get radioactive.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on our podcast. I truly appreciate it. And let's stay in touch. Right. And listeners and viewers, thank you for tuning in to Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham. Tune in Monday to our regular scheduled podcast, 12:30 to 1:30 Pacific Standard Time. Thank you for tuning in to Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham.